You are now watching the Ball and Beats podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back here to another episode of the Ball and Beats podcast. I am Logan, alongside me, Spencer and Alan through Zoom. How are we doing today, gentlemen?
I'm doing great. It's a great day outside. It's sunny. It's hot. You know, we're in the dog days of summer. It's beautiful.
We're in the dog days of summer, but the thing is, at the same time, this is a holiday week for us sports fans out there. You know.
Yeah,
we
the
mentioned
MLB All-Star game.
Oh, yeah, sure. Let's talk about that national anthem, by the way.
Yes, sir.
No, I'm just kidding. We're not going to talk about that, though. However, for us college football fans out there, we finally have a taste of college football 25. It has dropped, and boys,
Yes,
I have spent lots of time on this game already. I've already started my dynasty with Marshall. It's going well. We're 2-0. We did beat Kansas State, ranked on the road, by the way. But I just want to ask both of you guys here, how's it felt to play the game? I know both of you have.
So I had to work till 9 the day of the release. So I was kind of jealous you guys when you got to play it. But when I got home, I just did like one just quick match. I did Toledo at home against Ohio State. It was just awesome, man. The graphics are so smooth. The mechanics, the throwing meter is actually really nice. You know, it's actually really accurate, to be fair. I know some people don't like it because they just like the Madden where you press the button, it throws to them. I really like the throwing meter. I think it adds a little bit more realism to the game because, like, when you're on the run and throwing it across the field, your quarterback's never going to make that throw. They always made that throw in Madden and in the old game too. I just love Dynasty, though. Dynasty was my bread and butter. I, did so many rebuilds. I'm on East Carolina right now. It's my first rebuild. We got a few 5-stars coming in. Not legal at all, but we did it. Lambos all around in Greenville, North Carolina.
How did you pull that one off, by the way?
Lambos all around in Greenville, North Carolina.
Okay.
Tons of NIL money, but no, it's really nice to finally have this game. It lived up to the hype and then some. Road to Glory is really fun. And Dynasty was the one I was looking forward to the most. And I think the recruiting is really easy to learn and the mechanics of the game. It's just beautiful. The game is just perfect.
It's just beautiful that we have
EA
it back.
finally listened because they don't listen in any other of their games. They don't listen in Madden. They don't listen in NHL. They don't listen in FIFA. They don't listen in UFC. It's stupid. But they finally got it right. And the fact that there was over 700,000 people online in queue for just an online game, not even in Dynasty or Road to Glory or any of that, on the first night is nuts. This game will break so many records in box office sales. It probably is already on its way to do that.
Oh, it definitely is. And just the fact that we have this game back, it just means so much to us college football fans. Yeah. We've already kind of talked about it last week, me and Alan. But the fact that it actually is here, it's not a joke. Mm-hmm. They're telling the truth. The game is out. It feels great. Alan, what are your thoughts on the game?
It's so fun. I mean, I love it. And like you said, it's just really good to have it back. And I am so much in love with Dynasty right now.
Mm-hmm.
Washington State, we're going to do great things. 1-1, so it's fun, and I can't wait to continue.
Man, I already finished a season.
This man's already finished a season.
I did a season. It did a whole recruiting class, and I'm on my second season now. But I played it.
Bro,
absolute grinder over here. Absolute grinder.
I played it a lot.
For Road to Glory, I have a running back for Toledo. We've already played a full season as well. We won the MAC championship, but lost to NIU on the road and lost to BG.
How do you lose? Wow, it's like Toledo a few years ago. They lost to BG, but they won the MAC.
It was irritating. Nonetheless, though.
My 2-star quarterback for Kent State is starting.
Your 2-star.
And his first game is at Florida State, so I can't wait.
That's an amazing game. Amazing game. That's actually, that one's totally going on ESPN, by the way. You should have Chris Fowler and Kirk Herbstreit call that game. But just wanted to briefly talk about this video game again before we get into our real topics here today. This episode, you're talking football only, and to honor the fact that this video game has come out, that means football season's right around the corner, boys. That means football season is right around the corner, and we're going to preview every single conference in college football and every division in the NFL leading up to this football season. Let's start today. Let's talk about the Big Ten, okay? Let's talk about the Big Ten here for college football. Last year, of course, hate to talk about it, but, defending national champions, the Michigan Wolverines, as they played.
Had to cheat to do it, but that's all right.
Had to cheat to do it, but in the national championship, they played a now Big Ten foe in Washington. And, let's talk a little bit about Michigan real quick. How do we think Michigan can do this year? They've lost a lot. They lost Blake Corum. They lost J.J. McCarthy. They've lost a lot of pieces. But they've got Alex Orji coming in to be the starting quarterback for this season, at least on paper right now. Donovan Edwards, a cover athlete of the video game. Where do we think Michigan – let's start with the Michigan fan, though. What do we think Michigan does this year?
I think Michigan will be fine. I don't know if they'll have what it takes to win the Big Ten again. I definitely do think they could come close. It's just the losses. And this is our first time with our new head coach, his very first season as a head coach. So it's going to be a little rocky. I know there's that cloud hanging about the whole cheating scandal, Connor Stallions. We don't really need to dive into that. But I do think that a lot of people are going to disregard and just say that Michigan is over and it was a one-season thing. I don't believe it will be a one-season thing, but it's going to be a lot tougher. But I do think that Michigan could potentially win the Big Ten again. It's just going to be a lot harder.
You know that in NCAA, instead of coach suggestions, they have an Ask Connor Stallions button, and he tells you what defense they're running.
Nice.
It's great. No, but I think all in all, I still think Michigan has a shot to win the Big Ten this year. Until I see it otherwise, Ryan Day won't beat Michigan for me. Ohio State needs to get over this hump because if they don't do it this year, I want Ryan Day gone. I know people love Ryan Day because he's a good recruiter and all this stuff. I don't care. Like, if you can't win the big game, get out of here. And that's what Jim Harbaugh did for a while. And Kirby Smart when he was at Georgia. When he first started, he couldn't win a big game. But for Michigan, they have arguably the best defense in the country still. Even with losing all those pieces, they have the best corner in Will Johnson, the best defensive line, and Alex Orji. I mean, I think he'll be all right. And they have Donovan Edwards, who is a very good running back for them, and they have probably about 9 or 10 built-in wins. I mean, you beat Penn State every year, you beat the new teams, and the only games I think Michigan could lose is Ohio State, Texas, Oregon. I think they'll beat USC. I don't think USC is going to be very good this year. Oregon, I think, is a team that a lot of people are high on. But as for Michigan, yeah, I think they can win the Big Ten, honestly. If everything falls right for them, I mean, they have to play all the good teams in the Big Ten this year. Yeah, I mean, they control their own destiny. So I don't think they'll win the Natty. No, I don't think they have enough pieces to win that. But I still think they can win the Big Ten.
They're easily still in that top echelon here in this conference. The thing is now you have the 12-team playoff, so there is a little bit of wiggle room, say for an Ohio State or Michigan. If they lose the big game, that it might not mean that much depending on what their record is going into it. But for Michigan's sake, the real question is, how does Alex Orji play? We know he's a dual-threat quarterback. Michigan already is that ground-and-pound, run-style offense. They're not really going to pass the ball all that much. So we expect that to continue under Sharon Moore. Still that ground-and-pound kind of, beat at you all game, bludgeon you almost.
Which works with Alex Orji because he's a mobile quarterback.
Exactly. And that could open up the passing game for him as well. To me, Michigan, just because, Jim Harbaugh's no longer there, J.J. McCarthy's not there, Blake Corum's not there anymore, they still got good pieces. Sharon Moore's actually been recruiting really well, and it's really picked up here the last month or so as well. So I think that regardless, Michigan, they still have a good chance. Their schedule is very tough this year. They got Texas, like you said, Oregon, Ohio State, of course. This is a tough schedule for Michigan this year. They're going to have probably 2 or 3 losses regardless, I think. But doesn't matter now. I think Michigan still is in that upper echelon. They're still a playoff contender as well. They're not dropping far off. Michigan will continue to have success. Yeah. And they've really built themselves back up from really the dumpster that they were, 8 to 10 years ago. And so it's good to see Michigan finally back at that upper echelon in college football because they had just been down for so long. And now that team up north is back. to relevancy. So congratulations on that. Let's pivot to Ohio State, though, because there's a lot of expectation this year.
Yep.
3 straight years of losing to the Wolverines. And now
Yikes.
you had Ryan Day go and attack the transfer portal, got Will Howard from Kansas State, the best safety in college football as a freshman last year, Caleb Downs from Alabama, Seth McLaughlin, center from Alabama, Julian Sayin, a freshman kid,
Yep.
a true freshman.
5-star true freshman
Five-star
from
true
Alabama.
freshman from Alabama, who is competing for that starting job, by the way. It sounds like it's Sayin or Howard. Not necessarily Aaron Nolan, not necessarily Devin Brown even.
It has to be Howard.
It's gonna be Will Howard.
It's going to be Will Howard, and depending on how he plays early on, if they go to Julian Sayin later on in the season.
Yeah. So for Ohio State, there is a lot. Didn't even mention Quinshon Judkins as well in the transfer portal, arguably the best running back in the portal.
They had the best. Caleb Downs is my favorite. Caleb Downs was the safety that I wanted, and that's who they got. And
Yes.
he still has 2 more years left. He's got this year and next year.
They're going to have the best running back duo in college football this year with Judkins and Travion Henderson if they can both stay healthy. Ohio State, of course, they returned Emeka Egbuka at the wide receiver room, not to mention Carnell Tate, not to mention Brandon Innes, not to mention
It was
true
literally
freshman.
everybody except the defensive lineman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Michael Hall.
Yeah.
Michael Hall. But Jeremiah Smith as well, the true freshman as well, who's rated the highest
He's the
freshman in the video game
He's
this
gonna
year.
be a star.
Ohio State, on paper, should win the national championship this year. They should win the national championship, if not play in it this year, with the pieces that they have, the pieces they kept. It's similar to last year where Michigan returned all of those pieces that could have left, like Blake Corum.
It's very similar to Michigan.
And they all have one goal in mind, or really 2 goals in mind. Win a national championship, but before that, beat that team up north.
Yep.
No reason why Ohio State shouldn't win the Big Ten this year or make the argument that they should be in that game as well.
It's going to come down to that OSU-Oregon game.
It is going to come down to that OSU-Oregon game, but the thing is, I could see them playing again twice.
Yeah, that's
true.
true.
They could play twice this year. Now, Ohio State, they got to do it for Ryan Day's sake. He's got to get over that Michigan
He's got to
hump.
get it done because he's done this to where he's come close a lot of times. You know, you had the Georgia playoff game. You had with, them beating Clemson. That was Ryan Day's lone playoff win, and then getting obliterated by Alabama in the Natty. And then even before that in 2019, which I think is the best Ohio State team in my lifetime because of how many draft picks and how many stars they had in this. This team might compare to the 2019 team. They lost to Clemson. They lost to Trevor Lawrence. And Ryan Day needs to finally get it done because Buckeye fans, losing to Michigan is inexcusable 3 straight years in a row. Just ask Urban Meyer. Urban Meyer hated losing to Michigan. He didn't even do it. And for me, if they don't win the Big Ten, don't beat Michigan, don't win the Big Ten, Ryan Day needs to be going because it's inexcusable. You can recruit all you want, but if you don't win the important games, you're just going to turn out to be like James Franklin. James Franklin wins all these games, or is recruits at a high level for Penn State every year. They always have a top 20, top 15 class in the nation. And they never beat Michigan. They never beat Ohio State. And I don't want Ohio State to turn into that because right now that's who they are. They can't beat Michigan. They can't get over the Michigan hump. If it doesn't happen this year, when is it going to happen? Because Michigan has a less talented team than Ohio State this year on paper. On paper, Ohio State has arguably the most talented team in the entire country. You can put Georgia up there. You can put Oregon up there. Ohio State, with the transfers they got, have arguably the best team in the country on paper. This has to be the year Ryan Day breaks through because if it's not this year, it's not going to be any year. Because you can't get more talented than what this team has. And this team, a lot like Michigan, is going to be losing a ton of players in next year's draft because of how many seniors they have. And they have the talent. It's just they need to get the coaching and they need to get the job done.
Simple as that. Let's move on. You talked a little bit about one team. Let's talk about Penn State and James Franklin and Drew Aller and company out there in State College. See, here's the thing.
It was not a good first year for Drew Aller.
Not a good first year for Drew Aller. Had a lot of hype. 5-star recruit out of Medina, Ohio. They got Julian Fleming in the transfer portal from Ohio State. They still have a lot of pieces at the wide receiver room. They still got Nick Singleton at running back. So Penn State's still Penn State.
They're still very good.
They're still very good.
That's never a problem. Penn State's never not good. They are always very good. They just 10-2.
Yeah.
10-2.
And with this year, I don't know if they play Oregon or if they play, I don't know Penn State's schedule, but if they play Oregon, then yeah, they'll lose to them. But they'll beat everybody else. They'll beat, the Rutgers of the world, the Indianas, every once in a while when Iowa's ranked. I mean, but they will not beat Ohio State or Michigan.
Alan, what's your thoughts on the Nittany Lions?
I do like them. Like you guys said, I mean, it's 10-2 every year. I mean, I don't really see much of that changing. I do think Drew Aller will get a lot better. Again, it was his first year, so couldn't really gauge as much. But I mean, they'll have a fair chance. But again, beating Michigan and Ohio State's not happening because it never does. But they'll still go 10-2 probably, and they'll make
They will make the playoffs.
Playoff push. We could.
Yeah, they'll make the playoffs. They'll
Possibly.
be like 10, 11, 9, something like that. And James Franklin will be fine with that because he's fine with it every year. I
Yeah.
mean,
Something has to change, though, for the Penn State Nittany Lions because ever since he's been there, and it's no gripe against James Franklin. He's a good coach. Like
he is.
James Franklin is a good coach. Let's not get it twisted. But he's
not
also the most perfectly rated coach in college football. He is good enough to beat anybody else besides the best.
yeah, he's
Simple
what
as
Jim
that.
Harbaugh used to be.
He is what Jim Harbaugh used to be. The problem is Jim Harbaugh would still randomly lose to Rutgers or something when they went 2-5 in the COVID year, but that's not the point. James Franklin is the most perfectly rated coach. Everyone talks about it. He will beat anyone who is not better than him. When he is an underdog, he will lose. When he's favorited, he will win. And it hasn't really changed that much at Penn State since he's been there. And, I think give Penn State maybe like 2 more years, and maybe they're like, you know what, we got to get a coaching change because James Franklin, you got to beat Michigan, you got to beat Ohio State, you got to beat Oregon now. You got to make sure you still beat those teams out west. And now that you got USC, Washington, UCLA coming too. See, here's the thing. The Big Ten, now up to 18 teams, and now up to teams, the best teams out from the West Coast. That gives Penn State even more of those tougher challenges that are almost on their up at their echelon. That now it's like, maybe Penn State, we're sitting here, they're talking 7-5, And if Drew Aller plays like he did last season with the teams that are now in the conference, depending on how their schedule is, could be even worse than it has been for Penn State. That's a team you can see drop a little bit.
He was decent. He wasn't good. He wasn't bad. He was decent. But, man, he was terrible when he played Ohio State and Michigan.
Yes,
he was awful. He looked flustered. He didn't know what he was doing. He couldn't read their defenses. He just looked bad in those games. But he looked good in every other game.
Yeah.
Which is the Penn State way.
It is the Penn State way, for sure. Let's get into this team, the team that's probably got a lot of excitement right now, probably the hottest team on the recruiting trail, and a new member to the Big Ten, the Oregon Ducks. To me, on paper, this is the team who I would choose right now at this moment to win the Big Ten Conference.
Yep.
I know it sounds nuts.
I think they go undefeated.
But Dylan,
I think Oregon goes undefeated in the regular season.
they could go undefeated here in the regular season.
I don't care what their schedule is. I think they have Ohio State at home. I think that's the biggest difference. If it was at Ohio State, I'd pick OSU, but Oregon, it's in Eugene. So
At least right now, I would pick Oregon to win the Big Ten. Dylan Gabriel, he's on his 3rd college, but let's not forget how good of a quarterback he has been as well at both UCF and Oklahoma before. I think this is a guy who, come draft time next year, because there's always these guys who are like the older quarterbacks, the guys who've transferred around, that end up being like the 1st or 2nd or 3rd overall pick in the draft. Let's not act like that could happen for Dylan Gabriel. I think it could happen for Dylan Gabriel.
look at Jaden Daniels.
He's right now the Heisman favorite, for the preseason Heisman favorite coming into this season. And if you look at the rest of Oregon, great defensive pieces. Bringing Evan Stewart, the wide receiver from A&M, in the transfer portal. Still got Tez Johnson as well. They got a great wide receiver duo, maybe the best wide receiver duo in the conference. Oregon is set up with Dan Lanning for absolute success. This is a program now with name, image, and likeness that is going to succeed amazingly. Phil Knight, he is filling them pockets up in Eugene.
Yes.
He is going to do wonders, and Oregon's going to do wonders. And I think they finally get a national championship here in the next couple years. I think they get their
I think
first
Dan
one.
Lanning is that guy because he's recruiting at a very high level for Oregon, a level that they haven't had. I mean, they've always recruited well, but not this well. And I do think Oregon is the best team in the Big Ten right now, currently.
and I think they end up winning the Big Ten. I think they go undefeated, and they're the number 2 or number 1 team in the country. I'm really high on the Ducks this year because this team has a really good offense. Dylan Gabriel is going to fit in with that scheme, and their defense is even better than their offense. I mean, if Oregon's going to do it, a lot like Ohio State, it's got to be now.
Yeah, it has to be now.
Because Dylan Gabriel, this is his 1 year. So
yeah, but I do feel like if we are looking down the road 5 years from now, I think we could make the argument. I feel like Dan Lanning, he may be.
Oregon will be set up. Yeah.
I think Oregon will be at that Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State level. I think Dan Lanning might arguably be the best coach in college football at that point. I think you've got a great recruiter. You've got all the facilities in the world. You got Nike behind you.
Oh, you got a ton of NIL.
And in today's day and age, Oregon is probably the best set up. Oregon and Texas, I think, are the 2 schools that are the best set up to kind of become the next Alabama, Georgia. I think because Texas, you have a lot of oil money. You have a lot of, boosters backing the University of Texas, a lot of money there. And with Oregon, you literally have Nike in your hip pocket. You have Phil Knight.
That's all you need.
Who is willing
You just need Phil Knight because Phil Knight will give you infinity money.
He will give you infinity money to win. And regardless, now you still have to go out there and you still have to play each of those games regardless. But I think that Dan Lanning, with how he is as a head coach, the way he can motivate his players, I think Dan Lanning is probably a top 3 head coach in college football right now already.
Yeah.
That's what I believe. And I think that he's going to be set up to maybe become the next great head coach here in college football. I think he's going to win a national championship at Oregon. I think they have the capability to do so, and I think that that's a team to reckon with and become a future rival of the Buckeyes and the Wolverines.
The Ducks and the Bucks.
The Ducks and Bucks, that's
the Uck Bowl.
That's a wild one, Spencer. Since Alan isn't here right now, we have some technical difficulties with Alan. Let's quickly get into a dark horse team here from the Big Ten. We'll get his once he's back on with us. What's a dark horse team for you, Spencer, that you think could make a sneaky run in the Big Ten Conference?
I don't know if they really count as dark horse or not, but people have kind of doubted them because of how much they lost. I think Michigan legitimately can win the Big Ten. I know that people are saying it's literally only Ohio State or Oregon. That's what I see. It seems like everyone's only choosing Ohio State or Oregon, the winner of that game, and they'll probably meet again in the Big Ten title game. I really think Michigan's defense, because they have Mason Graham, they still have Kenneth Grant. Will Johnson's arguably one of the best players in college football at any position. Donovan Edwards is still there. I do think this Michigan team, not win a natty, but I think they can run it back and make some noise to win the Big Ten.
Yeah. Not surprising. I mean, they've won it 3 times in a row.
Yeah.
Might as well go for a 4-peat here for the Wolverines. And like you said, they still have the talent. They're still an upper echelon team in this conference. Michigan, they're not going to drop off like crazy. Some people think the drop off is going to be nuts. 9-3, specifically with how the conference is now set up, that's pretty good.
Another one that Nebraska is another one. Nebraska with getting Dylan Raiola, a 5-star quarterback. They could easily be undefeated going into the Ohio State game. I don't have their schedule on me. Their schedule is so easy. They don't have to play anybody except Ohio State. Their first 7 or 8 games, they're all going to be favorited in, because they play Colorado at home, and then they play their old Big Ten West teams, and then they play their teams that they just have set up to die.
Yeah.
I'm going to pull up their schedule because I know their first 8 games. The
thing is, as well with Nebraska, year 3 now under Matt Rule. Matt Rule, he's a program builder or a program rebuilder more than anything else. In Nebraska, they haven't been what they have been since the 1990s, the mid-90s.
So they have versus UTEP, versus Colorado, versus Northern Iowa, versus Iowa or Illinois, at Purdue, versus Rutgers, at Indiana, and then at Ohio State. They play UCLA, at USC, Wisconsin, and Iowa. I see them losing 2 games, 2 or 3. They could easily win 9.
Anywhere from 8-4 to 9-2 team right there. specifically
And-
if Raiola plays well, if Nebraska
Yep.
doesn't choke like they have the last.
Yeah, because
going
you know
the last few
we've
years.
been saying Nebraska has been good, especially you, for a few years now, and they always go 4-8 or 5-7.
Thing is, Nebraska.
But I do think things will change with Matt Rule.
Yes.
Because he turned Baylor around like very fast.
I mean, Nebraska last year, they did go 7-5.
Yeah.
You know, so they are back on the the upswing.
Yes.
So I think that Nebraska in the next couple of years, specifically with Rule, it could happen this year. That, like you said, that
I
could
could
be a
see
good
them
surprise.
making the Big Ten title game if things go their way. They just have to win at Ohio State, and I don't know. If that was in Lincoln, that'd be a game I'd be terrified of if I was Ohio State.
For me, I'm gonna go with the Wisconsin Badgers.
Ooh.
You know, I think that they've gotten a little bit disrespect the last couple of years, and now with Luke Fickell as their head coach, we saw what he did at Cincinnati. You know, and I think that he can continue that here with Wisconsin. They've lost some pieces. They've got some pieces. You know, they actually got a Toledo transfer, R.J. Delancey, there for their secondary.
Alan's
But
back.
for me, what's up, Alan? Alan has returned. You can hear him, can't see him yet. But for Wisconsin, I think that this is a team that I feel like is going to benefit actually playing tougher opponents and having to go on the road to Camp Randall in October, November.
They play Alabama at home week 3. That's a
do play
huge game.
Alabama.
That's
at
a
home.
huge game for Wisconsin.
It's a massive game, and
It's a winnable game.
it is a winnable
You think
game.
Alabama's going to win in the cold? Please.
I mean, to be fair, it is September when they're playing.
It's Wisconsin.
It's September.
It's Wisconsin.
It's September. But regardless, I think Wisconsin is a team that the last couple of years they've kind of slipped a little bit. You know, they were always the team in the Big Ten West. Always. You always thought Wisconsin. They always have the running game. Everyone knows how Wisconsin is with the running game. I think they're going to be more of a pass-first team a little bit now under Luke Fickell. And I believe, if I can recall correctly, I think their starting quarterback's Tanner Mordecai, SMU transfer,
Oh, wow.
if I can recall. So I think this team is going to be more pass-ready under Luke Fickell. They're still going to run the ball. They're still going to be ground and pound. That's Wisconsin at its best. But I think this team's going to start opening up the passing game under Luke Fickell here in the next couple of years. And that crowd, jump around,
Wisconsin, I mean, it's one of the
Underrated.
toughest places to play.
a very
Yes.
underrated Power 5 just atmosphere to play in.
Yes.
And I feel like you have Alabama coming there. You have some of these other big schools, some of the schools joining the conference that haven't played really in these atmospheres like that. I think Wisconsin's going to greatly benefit. And then another team as well, I'm going to go with the Hawkeyes. Go with the Hawkeyes in Iowa. Not their offense, obvious
I
reasons.
can't do it because of the offense.
Not their offense for
But
obvious reasons.
they don't have Ferentz anymore. They OC.
Let's see what happens.
So maybe
the offense
Iowa
just
will
takes a
score
step.
15 or 14 points instead of 10 every game.
I think Cade McNamara is not as bad as people say he is, okay?
No, he's not.
And I think that this offense can do really well. So, Alan, we're talking about our dark horses for the conference. You kind of missed a little bit of what we were talking about with Oregon. But real quick, what's a dark horse out of the Big Ten for you, or two of them, that you think have a secret chance or a chance at winning the conference?
I'm not gonna lie, I could see USC winning the Big Ten. I really could. It'll be a bit different, obviously, but it's just their offense won't be the same. But I still think that their offense can still put up the points. It's their defense that's obviously gonna need the work. I also do believe Iowa could make an impact with their new offensive coordinator. But again, Cade McNamara, I know, my favorite guy.
He is your favorite
I can't
guy.
believe he's still there. I thought he was done.
Nope. Cade McNamara
Nope, he's
still
still
around.
there. He's okay. He's an all right quarterback who can get you through games. And
So
honestly,
basically what
for
you're saying
Iowa-
is he's an all right quarterback, but maybe not the greatest human being, according to your sources.
we don't need to talk about that.
How
That's
much of a
the past.
smack in the face would be if
Anyways,
USC wins the Big Ten year one? That they're there.
I'm-
all the Midwest Big Ten fans, if
Oh, yeah.
any of these out west teams win it, it feel like you got your lunch money taken from
I
you.
swear. I gotta say
I
this.
might cry.
That'd be so stupid.
I gotta say this about USC though. I don't know if you guys listened to SEC Media Days at all and saw what Paul Feinbaum had to say about Lincoln Riley, but he's not that wrong. He said he's the most fraudulent head coach in college football. He said he won't be able to win anything because he has not learned how to operate a defense or get defense. Like, look at Oklahoma and look at USC.
Yeah.
Their defense is
USC's defense last
historically
year was terrible.
awful. It's
They
awful.
had the Heisman Trophy winner in Caleb Williams. Everyone expected them to make the playoffs. Their defense was horrific. They gave up like 50 points to Cal.
Yeah.
It was terrible.
Yeah, this defense, atrocious. At Oklahoma, atrocious. And this team went 7-5 last year. Let's not sit here and act like Lincoln Riley wasn't the talk of college football that whole offseason when all the coaches left.
Yep.
All of it was about USC and Lincoln Riley.
They're paying him all this money. They won't get rid of him
They
yet.
are paying him all this money. Lincoln Riley is not a top 10 head coach in college football right now. He's not. He might be one of the best offensive minds out there. He might
He'd
be
be
a
an-
great.
and
He's a quarterback guru.
He'd be a fantastic OC somewhere.
He'd be a fantastic OC in the NFL.
Yeah.
Head coach, you need to also utilize the defensive side of the football, and he just hasn't really been able to. He has not been able to since he's been a head coach. For me, with USC, if you got to have defense in the Big Ten, regardless. Do you have to have defense in the Big Ten to win, specifically when it gets cold outside? Now that you are playing,
You have to have defense to win the Big Ten.
exactly.
It's not even close. Just look at Michigan.
You're talking about, we talk about the AFC North being the black and blue division of the NFL. Big Ten, you got to work in the trenches.
Yep.
You got to, you got the farm boys, you got the Iowas, the Nebraskas, the Minnesotas of the world. Regardless, they're going to have the trenches set. And if the trenches aren't working, you're screwed.
If you don't have a good offensive or defensive line in the Big Ten, you will not survive. Because every single team, they all work on their lines because you win in the trenches. And that's big in the Big Ten. Michigan, the past few years, has won the Big Ten because of how dominant their offensive line has been, and even better, their defensive line. When you had Ohio State with Urban Meyer, every single team had a first-round pick or second-round pick on those Buckeye teams. You had Billy Price. You had all those, those pieces on the offensive line, and then you had your defensive line pieces like Chase Young, like the Bosas, all those, and then you had an even more better secondary. So, but if you don't have a good line, offensive or defenses, you will get destroyed in the Big Ten.
the thing is, USC right now doesn't necessarily have either of those, I think.
No, they don't.
And the thing is also, Lincoln Riley, he's starting to lose a lot of the guys he's been recruiting as well. Like the 4- and 5-star recruits going out there to USC, a lot of them are now transferring out.
USC is going to be bad soon. I think USC is going to have a rough year this year in the Big Ten.
I do too.
I think they're going to have a rough year. They're not only going to regret going to the Big Ten, but they're just going to slowly go down into what Texas used to be, 6-6 every year.
Well, I mean, they were at that point.
I mean, they
before-
were 7-5 last year with the best quarterback in football last year.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, congrats. You can get Heisman Trophy winning quarterbacks. You haven't won a single playoff game, and you've been to the playoffs 3 times? With
3 or 4 times.
3 or 4 times with Oklahoma. Haven't been yet with the USC.
Yeah.
So, you should have made it 2 years ago when Caleb Williams made it.
All you had to do was beat Utah.
All you had to do was beat Utah one time, and you lost to them both.
Yeah.
And go Utes.
Go Utes.
Go Utes.
Go Utes.
Because, yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah. This conference really, I think, moving forward, it's really set up for I think, Ohio State, Oregon, Michigan. You can make the argument Penn State might. I think Penn State's still on that second echelon. I
Yeah.
think you're talking Oregon, Ohio State, Michigan, at least for the next couple years, are probably going to be the top 3 in the conference.
Yes.
Regardless. And then, you're going to get the occasional Michigan State randomly out of nowhere. You're going to get the occasional
That's
Iowa,
another team I think
Wisconsin.
I think Michigan State and Aiden Childs, I don't think they'll be good this year. I think they'll get a bowl game, and I really do think Jonathan Smith will bring Michigan State back to what they used to be.
It'll take a little bit.
It'll take a little bit because they had a lot going on with Mel Tucker and that whole situation. But I do think MSU will get back to being that perennial 10-2, every once in a while winning the Big Ten team. Because Michigan State 2 years ago went to the Peach Bowl and won against Kenny Pickett and Pitt. And they beat Michigan. That was and then they lost, got obliterated by Ohio State. But no, I do think Smith will bring MSU back to greatness.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Michigan State has a chance. I think they could be a sneaky dark horse team this year too. The thing is, I think
they're a year
Wisconsin,
out. I think they're 1 year out.
Year out.
Next year, if they go like 6-6, 7-5, which I do think they can, and Aiden Childs will be good. I do think MSU can make a run for the Big Ten next year. This Big Ten, I tell you what, besides Oregon, these out west teams are going to have a tough time. UCLA is in arguably the worst situation. They just had their head coach leave for an OC job, and not in the NFL, in conference.
Yeah.
To Ohio State. And UCLA has lost a ton. USC is just slowly going to be 7-5. They lost their Heisman Trophy winning quarterback. And Washington, you think Michigan lost their entire team? I can't name a single player that stayed at Washington from last year to this year.
To be fair,
I literally think they lost all 53
You got to
players.
remember they also lost their head coach, Kalen DeBoer, to Alabama with Nick Saban retiring.
And their OC.
They got the Arizona head coach to replace my camera. I think Jed Fish is his name, if I can recall correctly.
Something like that, yeah.
But he brought a lot of pieces from Arizona. I think Washington can still be middle of the pack. I think USC, Washington are still kind of middle of the pack in the Big Ten. I think you're going to see UCLA kind of be at the lower end, though. I think they're going to be down towards the bottom.
They're going to be bad.
Who's one head coach? Let's wrap up our Big Ten talk here. Who's one head coach we think that's on the hot seat this year and expect to be fired by the end of the year?
You go first. I'm going to think.
Okay. Mine is a random name, but I'm going to say it. PJ Fleck in Minnesota.
Yeah.
I think he's been there now about 7-8 years since his success at Western Michigan. Minnesota, they've been kind of stagnant. Yes, he has a great program. He's a great motivator. He's a good builder and leader of men. The problem is, with a program like Minnesota, it's so hard. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're
it's hard to get fired because you're never expected to do anything.
Exactly. That's the thing. Like, I feel like he could be fired. The thing is, I could also still see him as their head coach in 10 years. You know what I mean? So, like, the thing is, Minnesota's the program that's usually 4-8 or 9-3. You know what I mean? I feel like
they have 1 year every once in a while.
Yes.
Like once every 4 years, Minnesota will win 9 games, and they'll be ranked in the top 25 at some point.
Yeah.
Heck, what was it, like a few years ago? They were ranked like in the top 10. They beat number 4 Penn State at home, and they were like undefeated, and then they fell off. Minnesota is one of those jobs that you just cannot win at. It seems like whoever's there. I mean, you had PJ Fleck, who's arguably one of the greatest MAC coaches of all time, who had one of the greatest seasons of all time at Western Michigan in 2016. He's had, 2 winning seasons at Minnesota?
2 or 3.
2 or 3.
It's
and
like
the rest
every other
have been
year.
like 4-8.
Yeah.
And 5-7.
Yeah, it's tough. Minnesota's a tough place to expect to win, and I think with PJ Fleck, I think he could just leave himself because he's like, I got to get a better job.
Yeah.
And I think PJ Fleck would do really good at a better program.
Yeah.
Overall program. Not saying Minnesota isn't a good, decent program because I think they are.
Mm-hmm.
They have a national championship in their history, unlike some other schools that like to say they do. So I think Minnesota, it's just one of those schools that it's like, you really can't.
It's like Vanderbilt. You can't win at Vanderbilt.
Yeah, Well, the thing is, it's not Vanderbilt. It's not Vanderbilt. It's more like Kentucky football.
Kentucky has consistently been good, though. Vanderbilt, when was the last
Kentucky
year?
hasn't been
when was the last year
consistently
Vanderbilt had a good year?
When James Franklin was their head coach in 2013.
Yeah, exactly. A decade ago.
Yeah. So, I don't know. For me, it's PJ Fleck in Minnesota. Allen, what about you? Let's go to Allen first.
Okay, I'm going to put a disclaimer. This is completely unbiased. I do believe Ryan Day will be in the hot seat. It's not because he can't. It's not for the lack of beating Michigan. I think it's the lack of national titles. And I do think that him not winning one is really affecting him. And I do believe that it's going to start to bring up questions of why can't you win a national title? It's not so much you can't beat Michigan, but especially with the new playoff format, you're expecting Ohio State to go far and potentially win a natty. But I just think if he can't win it this year or even next year, I think it's going to come into question and he might be on the hot seat.
I think it is beating Michigan. I think straight up. I think losing to Michigan 3 straight years has gotten to Ryan Day. It's gotten to Buckeye Nation a lot. But Ryan Day went out there, said, I'm bringing all you guys back. I'm going to go have an all-in year. If this doesn't work out, where do we go from here? Like, the Buckeyes are losing almost their entire team after this year. They have a few, they have Jeremiah Smith. They have Caleb Downs for another year. They have, Carnell Tate, who will stay, Brandon Innes. But I think he should get fired if they don't beat Michigan. I think it's simple. They lose to Michigan. I don't care if they win the Big Ten and lose to Michigan. That's different. But if they lose to Michigan and then next week they play Oregon and lose to Oregon and they make the playoffs still,
If they make the
Ohio State should
playoffs-
make the playoffs every year.
Yeah.
That's not a question. With
Now.
where Ohio State, yes, now with where Ohio State's at, you should be in the top 12 teams every single year. If you're not, you should be fired. If he loses to Michigan, who has less talent than Ohio State, this is at Ohio Stadium in Columbus, and then proceeds to lose the Big Ten, he should be fired. I love Ryan Day. I know people say, born on third base, which it kind of has somewhat meaning to it.
Yeah, it does have
But
some backing.
he was in the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
He has recruited at an elite level, though, and he's coached well. But the thing is, you can't put some things on him. You can't put the loss to Georgia on him. That was not him. That was arguably his best coached game of his Ohio State tenure.
Yes.
Was that Georgia game?
It was.
And they still lost.
Yeah.
Because of Noah Ruggles and because of, Marvin Harrison Jr. getting targeted and exit out of the field. The guy who targeted Marvin Harrison Jr. is now a Packer, by the way. So thanks a lot, Aaron. But love to see your drafting scumbags.
Nice.
But no, I think it's as simple as, and Logan can talk about this. I think it's as simple as if you don't beat Michigan, you should be fired. It's simple.
I say this. I think now with the playoff format, yeah, you should beat Michigan every single year. You should win the Big Ten every single year. I think if Ohio State, if they just lose to Michigan, they somehow
If they win the Big Ten, that's fine. But if they
win the
lose
Big Ten-
both,
I'll say this.
back-to-back weeks.
To me, if Ohio State doesn't make the playoffs this year, Ryan Day should be fired.
if
If they don't make the playoffs. If you have 2 losses, you don't get in the Big Ten Conference championship, you're not in the playoff.
if Ohio State loses back-to-back weeks, they're going to be in the lower level of the playoffs. They're going to be in the bottom 8, bottom 9.
And if they are, they still have a chance, though. And I almost
Yeah.
feel like Ohio State's almost the best when they have a loss, and they have a loss early in the season. I feel like if they lose early in the season, I feel like if they lose that Oregon game, they might bounce back. Because look at the last time Ohio State did win a national championship. You're talking
Virginia Tech week 1
Virginia Tech
at
week 2.
home.
Week 2 at
Oh, it
home.
was week 2, yeah.
So I think maybe the Oregon loss could help this Ohio State team out in the long run if they do lose that game up in Autzen State
Yeah,
and Eugene. But Spencer, do you have a different head coach in mind as well compared?
Right now, no. Oh, in terms of the whole Big Ten.
Yeah.
Problem is a bunch of the Big Ten is either new teams or it's new head coaches. There's a lot of new head coaches in the Big Ten. James Franklin's not going to get fired from Penn State. I don't think they will fire him because they are content with where they are at. But I know it's new. But Lincoln Riley, if he doesn't have a good year this year and he keeps losing recruiting battles, USC isn't going to take that. USC is the opposite to where they will do what it takes to win because it's Los Angeles. It's a massive market. USC has tons of NIL money.
You're talking the biggest brand on the West Coast, too.
The biggest
biggest
brand
college
in the
brand.
West Coast, in California, in the West Coast. USC will do what it takes to win. If Lincoln Riley can't provide that and he goes, say, 7-5 again this year, I could see reports of Lincoln Riley being on the hot seat and him being fired the next year if they don't get things turned around because they are on a rough recruiting trail right now. They're losing a ton of 4 and 5 stars, like you said, and I think people are noticing that no defensive recruit wants to go to USC, and that is not a good thing to have because USC's biggest problem was Alex Grinch and that defense. And even when Lincoln Riley, Alex Grinch has followed Lincoln Riley, and I think it's different because Alex Grinch was just a terrible DC, but Lincoln Riley's defenses, no matter where he's been, have been awful. And it's been the reason why they've lost. All those playoff games. They gave up 60-something points to Joe Burrow and LSU. And I get Joe Burrow and LSU is good. 60 points in a playoff game is embarrassing. That is embarrassing. But I do think, Lincoln Riley, if he doesn't get things turned around, I could see him being on the hot seat. And the rest of the Big Ten teams, there's just a bunch of new coaches.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like there's like 4 or 5 new coaches in the Big Ten.
Yeah. Newer coaches that are probably not going to get fired quite yet.
Yeah.
Unless, something crazy happens like with Pat Fitzgerald or
And then there's
like
teams that just won't fire their coaches, like Iowa won't fire Kirk Ferentz, no matter what.
Yeah,
he could go 0-12, they won't fire him.
Yeah. Very true. Very true. Well, I think that's going to wrap up the Big Ten preview in our first week of college football for preview here of the 24-25 season. We're going to stay right here, though, because we're going to move in to NFL season preview now as well. We're going to start off with probably the most mediocre division in the National
Start with
Football
the
League.
worst.
Let's
End
start
with
with
the
the
best.
worst. Let's start with the NFC South. All right. And I'm going to go first talking about Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the NFC South's winner this past year. Baker Mayfield has found his home in Tampa Bay. Let's be honest. He's found his home. It took a while. We thought he might just fall off the deep end, after Cleveland, going to Carolina. Carolina's an absolute dumpster fire, or was. Still might be a little bit of a dumpster fire. We'll have to see later on in this preview. But Baker Mayfield has found his home in Tampa Bay. Mike Evans is still there. You're talking about a wide receiver still with 10 straight 1,000-yard seasons. Maybe 11 now. I can't remember. I know he added to it.
He's at it every year. Yep.
Still some defensive pieces are still there. You still got Vita Vea on the defensive tackle line.
They are getting older, I will say.
They are getting older. Tampa Bay is getting older now. They're not getting younger. That's for sure. They're not getting younger. They didn't really add too much to get younger either. So
and they lost one of their corners in Carlton Davis.
So the thing is with Tampa, I think this team, you're talking about a team who could still, with this division, specifically,
I think any team in this division winning.
Really, I mean,
even Carolina, if things fall their way, which I will talk about.
Yes. Tampa, to me, this is a team still going to play about the same. I think they're still going to have roughly around the same record. I don't see them really going to like 11-6 or 12-5.
You don't see them going 13-4.
I don't see a 13-4.
Baker Mayfield MVP.
Depending on the schedule here for Tampa, I think it could fall into their lap. Where I see best case scenario, you're talking 10-7. I think 10-7 might be best case scenario, but I do think that regardless, I think Baker Mayfield's a top 15 quarterback in Tampa. I think he's a top 15 quarterback in Tampa in that 12 to 15 range. He's not anywhere higher than that. But I do think that Tampa, they have a solid foundation. Todd Bowles he's been a good head coach for him since he's been there, since he's taken over Bruce Arians' job. We all saw what Todd Bowles did at the Jets, but it's the Jets. I think now that he's got a second chance in Tampa, he's showing what he really is about. I do think Tampa should still be at least second in the NFC South. I think they should be at least second in the NFC South. I don't think they win it this year, though. I do not think they win it. Personally, I think that on paper, the Falcons should win this division, regardless. I do think the Falcons should win this division on paper. You got Kirk Cousins coming in, and we're going to have Alan talk a little bit about the Falcons anyway, but on paper, that's the best roster in this division. I don't think it's close.
I think Michael Penix challenges the job.
Oh, yeah. Oh, not yet. But
or is he going to wait 4 years until
Penix is 31?
Yeah, exactly.
Almost, yeah.
And then start.
Yeah. No, but to me, Tampa and Atlanta are your clear favorites in this division. I think New Orleans could also be fairly good. I still think Carolina's probably going to finish last. I hate to say it, but they do got a young coach, and there's always surprises. So you never know with the Panthers. But let's give it to Alan, and let's see what he thinks about the Falcons.
Yeah, I think the Falcons could potentially win this division. Based off of their drafting, I mean, obviously drafting Michael Penix Jr. shocked everyone because
that was the shock of the draft. By the way, all of us up there in Detroit.
Yeah,
I was in the media room.
Media.
I was in the media room. I found out about 5 minutes before they announced it, and we were all absolutely stunned. We were all talking about it before, and then some people they didn't hear it. They didn't hear it until it was announced, and the whole media room. Absolute gasp of like no way they just did that after
we were next to Falcons fans.
Yeah.
And they said some words I can't say on the air. But they were otherworldly irritated. They
That's what-
said some words that were not PG-13, and it was hilarious. I laughed.
After
It was so funny.
tampering hardcore to get Kirk Cousins, you draft Michael Penix Jr., a quarterback who
And then
has
then go on and say we're going to take the Green Bay method
Take the
of
Green Bay
sitting behind
See,
a quarterback.
it
The
would-
problem
it would've
is
made
you
sense
don't
if it
sit
was-
a 24-year-old quarterback.
It would have made sense if it was J.J. McCarthy and nobody else,
Yeah.
age-wise. But back to you, Alan. Sorry to cut you off
Yeah.
with all of that.
No, you're
Back on
good.
your Falcons preview here.
No, but yeah, that draft that shocked everyone. And again, yeah, they should have chosen JJ McCarthy if they're gonna draft a quarterback. But on paper, this team, they're looking like a 10-6 divisional winner. Honestly, again, this is the NFC South we're talking about. You don't need to be spectacular to win it. Their offense it's all right. I mean, obviously, their wide receiver core, I do think has actually gotten a lot better. My only question would be their defense. I don't know if their defense has gotten that much better, honestly, but I could see them winning at 10-6.
And see, here's the beautiful thing for Falcons fans. They no longer have Arthur Smith as their head coach.
Yeah.
So
At
I
least
think,
you got that going for you.
you know, you don't have Arthur Smith anymore.
But not a good start for Raheem Morris, right?
Yes.
Raheem Morris to draft Michael Penix Jr. with the 8th pick.
You know, I feel like, I don't know why, I feel like that was an Arthur Blank kind of move, not necessarily a...
I would have taken Dallas Turner there. I mean, I think it was as easy as taking that linebacker because, you know, Deion Jones has been gone and you need another linebacker. But, hey, I'm not the GM. I'm not getting paid to do that.
It's Atlanta. Why not create even more chaos to the fold? You know, and Kirk Cousins as
Poor
well.
Falcons
Kirk
fans.
Cousins
They've gone
is
through
now
so
their starting
much.
quarterback. You're talking about a guy in Minnesota who was statistically a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. The thing is, he never really played like a top 5 quarterback. You know, when it's 1 p.m., top 3 quarterback in the NFL. Any other time, he's top 32. So so when it comes to Kirk Cousins, you're talking about a guy with an agent who is the best agent in the history of NFL. No agents quite like this one, but he gets all the money in the world and just doesn't play like
No
the
agents
guy
any
who
better.
deserves it. So to me, with Kirk Cousins, it's just, you know, it's so irritating because he always goes for the money. It's obvious. All he cares about is money. Because if he wanted to win, he would have stayed in Minnesota.
Yeah. No, I think, and
all I gotta
we obviously don't know if Minnesota moved on from Kirk Cousins.
I think they could have.
And they could have. They could have. Minnesota could. Jeez.
Woulda, coulda, shoulda.
Woof. Woulda, coulda, shoulda moved on. I think, yeah, I agree. I think Kirk Cousins could have won in Minnesota, and he did. I mean, he won NFC North titles, and he didn't win a playoff game. So that's the Kirk Cousins special, but I think Minnesota fans are fine with that.
No one's won more playoff games than me, by the way.
No, no one's won more than me.
Exactly. But let's get on to the Carolina Panthers here, Spencer. Why
David
do you like-
Tepper, worst of all time. Carolina, yikes. Talk about a trash can. Sorry, my friend Josh is a Panthers fan, and he's not going to like this. Well, he'll like the end. Carolina was awful last year. Awful, awful, awful. G League. They were a G League team. If the NFL had a G League, they were a G League.
So
I'd
the
I'd
UFL.
pick Michigan to beat Carolina.
So the UFL.
Yeah, we'll go with the
Basically,
UFL.
they'd play the San Antonio Brahmas.
Birmingham Stallions should be moved to the NFL at this point. They won 3 straight championships every year. But with Carolina, new coach with Dave Canales, he is a quarterback guru. He turned around Baker Mayfield
Yes.
in Tampa Bay and really resurrected that offense in Tampa.
He could do the same for Bryce.
That's my. I think with Bryce Young, he's still super young. He's 22. He's in his second year now, and he was built to die in his first year, to be honest with you. He had no pieces. His best piece was Adam Thielen. Now, did they add a ton of great pieces? No. But they added Deontay Johnson from Pittsburgh. They drafted
Xavier Legette.
from South
I think
Carolina.
he can be a sneaky Rookie of the Year candidate,
Next
by the
Debo.
way. I genuinely love Xavier Legette. I thought he was
Yeah.
a top 5 wide receiver in this draft. I thought that he should have gone earlier in this class, to be honest. I think he was overlooked a little bit because he's from South Carolina.
Yeah.
And he's staying pretty much right there anyway. He's staying, playing in Charlotte.
He's just
with
moving
the
up
Panthers.
north. But yeah, and I think with their defense was decimated by injuries. They lost Shaq Thompson. They lost J.C. Horn. I mean, they just got destroyed injuries wise, and and halfway through the season, I think their players just gave up. And then Frank Wright didn't know what he was doing. I think Carolina. I think there's a role where Carolina wins this division. I really,
Wow.
I know it's crazy to say.
Wow.
I think that was my hot take a few weeks ago.
You did say that.
I think there's a world where Carolina wins this division, and I do think it can happen if Dave Canales can help Bryce Young, if they can help with this offensive line, who gave Bryce Young about 0.5 seconds to throw the ball, and if not, he was on the ground. And they added a few decent pieces, like Deontay Johnson, who is a solid player, Toledo guy. And I think he can really help that. And Xavier Leggett, who's a rookie wide receiver, who a lot of people have compared to Deebo Samuel in the way he plays. He went to South Carolina just like Deebo. I think Carolina, of course, they had the worst year last year, and it wasn't even close. It's arguably one of the worst years I've seen in a long time. I mean, they looked like they gave up, and I don't think there was a single game where they were favored. But I think there is hope with Dave Canales. I think that since he helped Baker Mayfield, he can help Bryce Young. This defense is going to be a lot better than it was last year.
I
Derek
think it was the
Brown on that
injuries.
defensive line.
Yeah.
They did lose Brian Burns, which does hurt, but they got draft capital for him, and they're going to get their healthy guys back. Shaq Thompson, who's a very good linebacker, J.C. Horn, who's a very good corner. It's not like it's not like they don't have pieces. Carolina has pieces. They just didn't. They were either injured or they had a very bad year last year. And it all started with that offensive line in Carolina, who gave Bryce Young no time. And I think with them hopefully improving that offensive line, we'll see, and giving Bryce Young an actual an actual coach in Dave Canales to help him out, I think Carolina can win this division, because I think any team in the NFC South can win the division, because of how mid it really is. Because at 9-8, you can win this division. I mean, that's what Tampa won last year, 9-8. And I think whoever wins this division will probably be 9-8.
Roughly, give or take, for sure. Let's wrap up here with this last team.
We all talk about the Saints.
We all talk about the Saints. We all talk about the New Orleans Saints. And to me, if we're going to talk about a head coach that I think is going to be fired first, I think Dennis Allen's the head coach. I thought he should have been fired last year, to be honest with you. But the Derek Carr situation is just not working. They're not getting any younger. The only real hope they have right now in that offense is Chris Olave.
That's
honestly.
it.
And Alvin Kamara, he's getting older. You just finally got rid of Slant Man and Michael Thomas. He's no longer there. So there's New Orleans, that defense as well. It's not getting younger.
Cam Jordan is still a very good player, but he's getting old. He's getting really old.
Cameron Jordan, top 5, top 10 defensive lineman.
He's a guy I could be seeing traded at the deadline.
He's going to want to win. And
Yeah,
I don't think
I could see him
New
getting
Orleans.
traded at the deadline.
I think New Orleans, regardless, is minimum 3rd in this division this year.
Yeah.
I think that
They won what,
they're not
7-10 last year?
7-10.
7-10, yeah.
This team is
They're mid.
mid.
Actually, they might be worse than mid. They might be just the tier below mid. Because, I mean, if you think about it, New Orleans has pieces.
Yes.
Chris Olave, one of my favorite Buckeyes of all time, is getting wasted in New Orleans, and I hate to see it. Derek Carr is a good quarterback. I think he should have just stayed in Las Vegas, because I think, and obviously it had a lot to do with Josh McDaniels of him getting kicked out, but I think if everything went to plan, Carr would still be in Vegas, and New Orleans would have drafted a guy, because the Derek Carr experiment has not worked out. New Orleans is not winning not winning games. They still have some pieces, but they are arguably, I think, in my opinion, they are going to be the hardest rebuild in the NFL. New Orleans is like one more season away from just blowing up the core and starting and building around Olave and starting it from scratch.
Not to forget, they're in salary cap hell.
Exactly.
As well.
They
They've
have
put
the
themselves-
worst cap situation, and I don't understand why they don't have like great players to pay all this money. They have Cameron Jordan, who's getting old. They have Derek Carr, who they're paying a ton of money.
Marshawn Lattimore.
Alvin Kamara. Who else?
Can't remember.
Is Tyrann Matthew still there?
I think so, actually. I think Tyrann Matthew is still there. But yeah, to me, the Saints situation, it's not great. It's not great. Everyone's getting old. This head coach, not a fan of Dennis Allen.
He'll get fired.
I
He's-
think he's
he-
the first head coach to get fired this season.
He's going to get, yes. He will be the first head coach fired.
I believe. And I think that you're going to sit here, you're going to realize New Orleans is going to be like, what, 2-9. They're like, ooh, how'd this happen? You know, because they do have the
They're
talent
bad.
to be. They
I mean,
have the talent to be
they
better.
don't have enough talent. They have pieces, but, like, New Orleans just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Like, their offense is very hot and cold, and so is their defense. New Orleans will show up one game and play great.
Yes.
They will have a great game. And then they will show up the next week and give up 21 points in 5 minutes to the Lions at home. I mean, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, very true. Alan, any thoughts on the Saints?
This team is garbage. Oh my gosh. Honestly, I know we said that like we could see any team winning this division, but I honestly think that they're not gonna win this division. It's not any team. It's just any team but them.
I think they
Yeah.
finish last. I think New Orleans finishes last. I think, man, I want to go with my Carolina pick. Yeah, screw it. I'll do it. I'll go New Orleans last. I'll go in third place, Tampa Bay. Second place, Atlanta. First place, Carolina.
Well, for me, I'm going Carolina 4,
Boo.
New Orleans 3, Tampa 2, Atlanta 1. I think Atlanta on paper should win this division. They have the most talent. They got.
You're
Bijan
trusting
Robinson.
a team that lost in 28-3 lead. I will never
could have
trust Atlanta, who drafted a quarterback in the first round after just signing a guy for $40 million.
They could also go fourth in this division. See, here's the thing. There's a reason why we chose this
Yeah.
division first.
Because we don't know. Do not bet on this division if you bet, because no one knows. There is not a single team out there who's that much better.
Yes.
These teams are all mid, and they will all lose at most in the divisional round. They could win a wild card game, maybe. They will not win a division. They won't win the divisional round.
No.
This team or this division is just not that good.
No.
That's why we did them first, because we want to get to the good teams and the good divisions that are later
on here down the road. I think this is a good spot to wrap up this episode here of the Ball and Beats podcast. Thank you all for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe, stay up to date on all new videos. Hit that push notification bell to do so. You know, that's
Only the best.
We'll be the best. We're the best podcast.
We're
in
the best
world.
podcast anywhere.
You know, can't get talent quite like us here.
Exactly.
Thank you guys for watching. We will see y'all next week with more college football and NFL preview. Signing off. We'll see y'all later. Take care.
Y'all are the best.